All right, everyone. So first of all, I hope you all had a great Christmas break. I hope you guys were able to get away from school a little bit and just kind of focus on you. I hope you guys are ready to finish this year up. As I'm making this video, I'm hoping we're still in class. I'm actually making this video over Thanksgiving break, but we won't be watching until after January. So fingers crossed that the COVID apocalypse hasn't happened yet, and we're all sitting in our rooms. It's looking at this video from home. So it would be interesting for me to see how that actually plays out. So we are still in the middle of period 3, which is 1750 to 1900. Now, in this period, like all of our 3 periods so far, there are 2 major themes. We have finished the first theme. The first theme that we looked at in this class was revolutions. Okay, so those are the political revolutions, the American, French, Haitian, Latin American revolutions, and then the Industrial Revolution, which in a lot of ways is much, much, much more important historically than the political revolutions, because it changes how people live more fundamentally than any other event in human history possible. So it's a revolution in how people work. The Industrial Revolution was a revolution in how families were organized. It changes where people live. People don't live in rural areas as much now. They're increasingly going to move to cities. It changes where things are going to be made. All throughout this class, we have said things are made in China, things are made in India, things are made in the Middle East. And now, in this period, that is actually changing as well, as the bulk of the things that are going to be made in the world are going to be made in industrial cities and those industrial powers in factories. And just to go back over them with you, the 6 big industrial powers we talked about were Britain, the United States, France, Germany, Japan. And remember to go back and look at all your Japan notes about what makes them unique, and Russia. Well, the second big theme, the first big theme is revolution. The second big theme that we're going to spend the next month on, and that finishes this unit up with, is the consequences of industrialization. Now, this is a big one. The industrial powers, for the most, or at least some of them, Britain and France, had already had maritime global empires. By the end of this unit, 5 of the 6, all of them except Russia, will have maritime global empires. Because when you turn to industrialization, what are you able to do? You're able to produce more resources. And what has happened over and over and over in this class, when people produce more resources, resources equals power. And what do people do when they have power? They start to conquer other groups of people. All of the industrial powers in this unit will also build empires. And this is going to be important because most of the world that was not colonized in period 2, big picture, will become a colony of an industrial power in period 3. This is kind of a dark way of looking at it, but it's a good way of looking at it. In this unit, you're either a sheep or a wolf. The sheep are the unindustrialized powers, and the wolves are the industrial powers coming for you. You're going to see huge empires built with truly global reach that are going to look very different than the maritime empires that some of these states had that we talked about in period 2. So the first question is, what is this movement called? This is going to be called imperialism. Imperialism in period 3 is when the industrial powers, those 6, conquer the non-industrial world. Places that had never been a colony before are going to become a colony, and this is called imperialism. I would underline that word. I would highlight that word in your notes. We're going to talk about imperialism for basically the rest of this month. So imperialism is the process of the industrialized powers conquering the unindustrialized parts of the world. Now, what we're going to focus on today is, what is the rationale that the industrialized powers have for conquering the rest of the world? In this unit, China is going to be conquered. Well, fundamentally going to be conquered. India is going to be conquered. All of Africa is going to be conquered by different powers. Australia is going to be conquered. New Zealand, we haven't even talked about Australia. New Zealand is going to be conquered. What do all these regions have in common? They have in common are the natives are not white. In 5 of these 6 industrial powers, including the most important ones, which are the first ones, the British, the French, and the United States, and even Germany to a lesser extent, are going to come up with racist ideologies to justify why they have the right to conquer other groups of people in the world. And when I say racist, I don't mean just run-of-the-mill basic racism where they put themselves at the top of social hierarchies and create new color-based systems of classification like they did in period 2. I mean breathtaking examples of racism. And the first is a theory called social Darwinism. Now, I'm sure in your science classes you've talked about the works of Charles Darwin and his theories of evolution. These theories were created in period 2, the idea that all species have evolved, and some species have evolved to be further and more complex groups of people, like humans, than others. I said people, and I should say animals in their instances. Well, in this time period, an incredibly racist ideology is created called social Darwinism. Social Darwinism teaches that just like all species evolved, and some species have evolved further down the evolutionary pathway, within humanity, there are certain species that have evolved further down the pathway. And you're never going to believe this, but the practitioners of social Darwinism believe those people are the whites. And using this breathtaking ideology, they'll say that the teachings of Charles Darwin teach the survival of the fittest, and we as the white guys are the most intellectually advanced. We have the best technologies. We have the most superior culture and religion. And because of this survival of the fittest, we have a right to conquer the lesser evolved human species, which are all just the various shades of brown: Africans, Indians, indigenous peoples in Australia and New Zealand, and the unique story of what will ultimately happen in China. Now, interestingly enough, one of those 6 industrial powers is not white. That's the Japanese. So you're like, well, they're not going to believe in a racist ideology like this, are they? Oh, yes. Oh, yes. They're going to believe that they are more evolved and further down the evolutionary pathway than their Asian neighbors. And breathtaking racism is also part of the Japanese justification for imperialism, particularly when they conquer Korea, and we'll talk about that. The Japanese, for all of the late 19th and first half of the 20th century, are going to do truly appalling things to the Korean people who they mostly conquered during this period. And they're using racist ideologies to justify the horrible things they're going to do to the Korean people. If any of you have a Korean friend, ask them, hey, what does your grandmother think of the Japanese? And there's a very high likelihood that you're going to learn some very colorful Korean cuss words, which is always a good time. But it's important to know that all of them use some sort of racist ideologies. In the United States, our racist ideology to justify imperialism is going to be a little bit different. It's going to be something called manifest destiny. And later on this unit, I've got a whole day about manifest destiny. But basically, it says that, hey, we have the right to conquer people in the Americas because they're not white, they're not Christian, and this is something that we have a moral justification to, and we use this to justify taking all the land of the Native Americans and attacking our weaker neighbor to the south, Mexico, and taking over 1/3 of their national territory in this unit. So, racism, it be a thing in period 2, it still be a thing in period 3, and is being used to justify these conquests that take place in this unit. A second justification for imperialism is nationalism. Groups of people in these home states, like in Russia, like in Japan, like in the United States, which is always kind of an interesting case story about nationalism, but we'll gloss over that for right. Like for Britain or France or later on Germany, saw colonization as a nation building experience that would unite the people in the nation. It would benefit the ruling nation of people economically, and it would also become a source of great national pride. For example, in Britain, the British Empire in this period, and we'll look at examples of what the British Empire will look like later, is going to be all over the world. They'll have territories in the Americas, Canada. They'll have territories in Africa, South Africa, and Egypt. They will have conquered India. They will have colonized Australia and New Zealand. And the British used to boast, the sun will never set, does not set. Let me try that one more time. The sun never sets on the British Empire. Somewhere in the world, in the British Empire, it's always light. That sort of boast is an example of nationalist pride. It became a source of pride for countries, nationalist pride, to build these empires. Sometimes, even if the colony wasn't worth anything, and this is going to lead the world to a dark and dangerous place. The last major imperial power in this unit is Germany. Well, since they were the last one to get into the colonization game, by the time they started getting into the colonization game, all the good stuff in the world had already become colonized. But they still build colonies for themselves anyway, just as a source of national pride. And what they're going to do, and this is what's going to put the world now on a very dangerous pathway, is in places like Africa, anywhere that you see a really rich, valuable, prosperous British colony, right next door into in a place of land that was essentially worthless. Maybe it was all desert or mountains or jungles. You're going to see a crappy German colony. But the dream of Germany was always to one day potentially take those British colonies. So sometimes they built colonies for no real good economic reason, just to be able to say, hey, look at us too. Look at the map. Hey, we're Germany and we have colonies all over the place too. So nationalism is a justification for imperialism because it unites people. The theory would be it economically benefits the ruling nation. And this is also true for Japan and the United States. Speaking of breathtaking racism, another justification for imperialism was something called the Civilizing Mission. Now, what's the problem with Darwinism and social Darwinism? If you're a Christian, you don't really believe in it. At least, especially not in the third period. You don't believe in the theories of evolution because that flies directly in the face of the Bible. Most of these states, except Japan, were majority Christian. So, a second breathtakingly racist ideology was created that was more appealing to Christians in these places. And guys, I'm a Christian. I'm a believer. I can tell you when things are wrong with Christianity, and this is going to be one of them, is the Civilizing Mission. The Civilizing Mission taught that white people had an obligation to conquer all these various shades of brown people's land because they needed us. They're so uncivilized. They're so backwards in their economic systems and in their religion that we have a moral duty towards them to conquer them and to spread our practices and to spread our religion of Christianity to them. I don't know if any of you have ever seen, it really is one of my favorite Disney movies, The Jungle Book. Well, the actual person who wrote The Jungle Book was a man named Rudyard Kipling. Rudyard Kipling was a breathtaking racist who also wrote a poem called The White Man's Burden. And in this poem, it was basically, and all these savage, dark-colored people, they need us. This is our right, but it's also our obligation to rule over them and to impart upon them our civilizing ways, our religion, our way of life, our culture. And this was called the Civilizing Mission. And that, my friends, is some pretty breathtaking racism. And then the fourth reason is, and this is different from the Civilizing Mission, it truly is, you do see groups of people in each of these states who genuinely wanted to spread Christianity for truly what I would call matters of belief. You've got groups of people who will send missionaries all throughout the world to try to convert natives to Christianity. One of these places is the British in New Zealand. New Zealand is a set of islands off the coast roughly of Australia. And the first British colonizers to go to New Zealand in large number were missionaries attempting to convert the native people. I would argue it wasn't for economic benefit. I would argue it wasn't for the benefit of expanding the empire. The original people who did this were genuinely passionate about their belief systems and trying to spread it to the native people. We're going to look at how unique of a civilization that results in with New Zealand later on in this class, including the coolest sporting team possibly in all of the world. But that's another story. So these are the four big rationales for imperialism. I would argue the first three all have some sort of basis in racism. Social Darwinism, nationalism, seeking to elevate your nation at the expense of groups of people you've conquered, and the civilizing mission. And then the fourth one was the desire of missionaries to spread their faith globally. Long story short is once you have justified to yourself that you have a moral right to do something like this, now all that has to happen is, oh, we have more guns. Oh, none of these people do. Let's go conquer the world. And that's what's going to happen for the rest of period 3. And that's the big picture direction that we're heading in. And it's not going to be a pretty sight. And what I need you to understand is, why are the British going to be able to conquer India? Why are all the European states in the United States and Japan going to carve out territories for themselves in China? And I'll explain what those are later. It's a little simplistic. Why are all these powers, except for Russia and Japan, going to have colonies in Africa? Why is this happening? And the answer is industrialization. When you're one of these states that is industrialized, your advantage over non-industrialized groups of people is so big and so vast, so large that the natives are not going to have any way of defending themselves. That even in this unit, the British in Africa, they'll fight natives who are basically Zulu soldiers who have spears. The British have machine guns. Think about that. That's how big the gap has become over the course of everything we talked about in period 2, and now with these powers in period 3. So always remember, when we talk about imperialism, it's tied to industrialization. Who industrialized is also who's building the empires in this period. They go hand in hand. So that's our lesson for the day. We're going to keep working on this all throughout January. Got my fingers crossed that when I'm showing this video, we're all in school. Unfortunately, sitting here in the middle of on the Tuesday of Thanksgiving break, I'm not very hopeful that that's happening, but I'm hoping I'm wrong. Y'all have a great day.